Welcome to part 18 in our series on building a PHP-based login system. I want to continue where I left off in part 17 and discuss adding a little bit of additional functionality to the register.php page. Specifically, I want to cover two topics. First of all, I want to make sure that the register.php page is inaccessible to regular members. I want to make sure that only administrative members have access to this page. Secondly, I want to be able to set the member type. So if I go to phpMyAdmin, I want to be able to set this column from the register.php page. So let's get started. First thing is pretty easy. So I'm on the register.php page, and we want to make sure here, let's check that the user is an admin. So do they have permissions to access this page? So let's do an else if, and if they're not an admin, and again we're using that function that we created in part 17 is admin. So if they're not an admin for some reason, let's go ahead and redirect them. And rather than kicking them out to the login page, let's just send them back to the members page. So let me save this. I'm going to refresh this page. Login as usual member. And it looks like we've been successfully logged in. And you'll notice that we tried to enter in registers.php, and I hit enter, and we were automatically redirected back to members. So that's working the way it should. And the second bit that we want to make sure is we want to modify our form and be able to set that user type, or member type in this case. So let me open up the register form, and just below the email, I'm going to copy and paste this section. I'm going to include member type. And I'm going to delete this input. And instead, below it, we're going to add a select. The name of type. And then I guess I do need this bit so we can display an error message if necessary. And then within the select, I'm going to use a PHP statement, and I'm going to simply echo out a variable that I've called select. And we'll set this variable within the register.php page. So I believe that's all the edits that I need to do to this page. So let's go back to register.php, and let's do a little bit of setup. So we're going to go ahead and add in, just after email, add in type. And same thing here, just setting both the input and the error messages on type. And then I guess the first thing we want to do, let's go down to the bottom of the screen, and just before showing the form, we want to create the form options, actually the select options. So let's go ahead and create a select variable. And the first option I'm going to create is one that I'm going to call select an option. So it's just a standard blank option. And then we're going to use MySQLi, or well, PHP loop, but MySQLi within it to echo out all of the different permission options. So in our case, we just have two. We have an admin and we have a member. So we're going to go ahead and create a MySQLi statement. And we're going to prepare a statement, and it's simply going to be select ID and type from permissions. Actually, this is name. Excuse me. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and do statement execute. And then we want to bind the results. And we're going to create two variables, an ID variable and a name variable. And then just below that, we're going to use a while loop. So while statement fetch. And this will loop through each of the rows in the database, or I guess specifically each of the rows in the results from this query. And then we're going to add to the select statement with the dot equals. And for value, we're going to use ID. And for the actual name of the option, we're going to use name. Like so. And then finally at the bottom here, we're going to close our statement. So let me save that. And let's go ahead and test it. I believe it should be working so far. Okay, so you'll notice that we have an option and it has admin and member. And if we view the source, they have the correct values, value 1 and value 2, which correspond to the ID value within the permissions table. So that's almost good. You'll notice we have a little bit of a styling issue. So to fix that, I'm going to modify style.css and simply add a comma select. And that will set all the settings that were originally just for inputs. It'll also allow it to be set like that. And let's refresh this page. There we go. And that's working as it should. So back to the register page. The next step is obviously to be able to save this information to the database. So close the register view, go back to register.php, and we're going to go ahead and copy and paste this section. So copy that. This only shows up on the first time this page is loaded. If the form is submitted, we also need to set that up. I'm going to set it up after getting the data from the form. And to pause for 1 second, we need to also set up our input variable. So I'm going to call it type. And we need to modify our select option slightly, because I want to make sure that, just as an example, let's hit submit. Try that one more time. You'll notice that these fields are required, and if you hit submit and you have errors, the fields stay filled in like they were before. And I want to make sure we do the same thing here. So rather than simply just echoing out all the examples, we're going to modify this section within the while loop a little bit. So to do that, we're going to do select ID up through here is fine. And the next statement, we're going to use an if statement. And we're going to check if the input type equals the current ID. So in the loop, we have an ID value, and if so, that means this item is selected. So in that case, I'm going to add select.equals, and I'm going to add selected equals selected, like so. And then we're going to finish this off. And that's it for this section. So let's save it, and let's go ahead and preview it and make sure it's working correctly. So, and if we add in member, hit submit, and you'll notice member stays selected even though the page refreshed and showed us that we had errors in our input. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of validation. We want to make sure and make sure that it was set. And then I'm going to copy this line and change email to type. So that makes sure that we can't miss filling in that or choosing the correct option from the list. And now all we need to do is we need to modify this query, not this one here, where we insert into the database, and we need to make sure that we're inserting this data correctly. So username, email, I'm going to add in type, add in another string, user, email, type, and a comma. So that's good. I believe we're almost done. Let's go ahead and set the type to blank, assuming this all inserts. And I believe that's it. So let me save it. Oh, one last thing. Because we added in an extra field here, we need to add in an extra question mark. So let's save it, and let's take a preview. So I'm going to add admin2. And I'm going to select admin. And it looks like the member was added successfully. Let's check our database, the members table. And you'll notice, yep, we have a new user with the correct type included. That concludes this tutorial. Thanks for listening, and hopefully you've been able to follow along. Obviously, we've just touched the surface of what you can do with permissions. For example, I mean, you can modify the permissions table. You could add additional columns if there are certain features that you want to be able to enable or disable per member type. You could add additional rows. For example, you could add maybe a moderator type in addition to admin and member. So hopefully that gives you a basic introduction to user permissions, and if you have any questions or if you have any comments on how you might go about adding additional features, please feel free to email me. My email is ben@killersites.com, or you can contact me on the Killer Sites forums at killersites/community, where I go by the username Falcon Creative. Thanks for listening.